teach you everything that you know about playing slap bass. All right, let's just get right into it. So this style of playing is actually what inspired me to become a musician. I just think slap bass is the coolest thing. And the first time I saw it, it seemed impossible, but it's not. It's actually fairly simple. You can do everything in this video. It's just gonna take some time. Everything I was playing there is just 4 notes and a lot of really cool different percussive techniques. And there's so much of an emphasis on those. This of course isn't like the way to play slap bass. This is just what I've come up with over the years to make it as simple for me as I can. Also, yeah, a lot of this that I've learned, I learned from watching Primus. So hey Les, sorry for ripping you off. A little bit about gear. I have my bass going into a compressor, and that just takes the high volume stuff and low volume stuff and evens it out. And that's something that I just wish someone told me right when I started playing bass. It helps a whole lot. All right, let's start. We're gonna go string by string. Here's what we're gonna do on the low E. So on the low E, you're only going to play 2 notes and just in 2 places. We just have the low E note. Oh yeah. On this string, you're only going to be playing that note and the 1st fret. And that's it. So it's just E and F. And we're not gonna play them in any other position either. It's just open and the 1st fret. Let's get into how we're gonna be getting the E. And this is such a huge part of playing slap bass, and that's the actual slap. And it's so satisfying. So this is something that took me quite a while to get. It's more of a flick of the wrist. It's not bringing your whole arm into it. It's just kind of a flick. And I'll maybe like move my arm just a slight bit to accent notes. You're just hitting it with this part of your thumb. Right there, this little bony part is where you want to be hitting the string. When I first started playing, I thought I had to hit it with that and then immediately get off the string like this to like get out of the way. But it's not really like that. It's more you're striking through the string. It's almost like you're aiming for the next string. Like you're strumming through it and just hitting it on the way. You kind of hit this one, like not directly. Just like that. You can kind of have like a claw if you want, tends to be how I do it, or you can just go fist, thumbs up, really whatever is more comfortable for you. The goal is just to hit the crap out of that string, but not in a way that's gonna strain your hand. You're just getting a lot of energy from flinging that thumb around. And it sounds so satisfying. And when you rest on the next string, it has the added benefit of muting the next string, which is really important. So that's a huge part about playing slap bass, is muting the strings you don't want to hear. A lot of your focus is on the strings you don't want to play so that you get a clear note from the string that you do. We'll move on to the left hand. This is a position you'll get really, really comfortable with. The low E is so foundational to slap bass. So I have my 1st finger on my left hand just on these 3 strings, so that if I play them, I'm only getting the low E. And that makes it so that you don't need to be so precise with this hand. That's another thing that I didn't realize right when I started playing slap bass, is like, how do you get so precise with your right hand? And the trick is that you kind of don't. Like, you just mute the strings you don't want to hear, and then you can really go nuts on this side and improvise a lot and miss some things, and you're still just gonna get the notes that you want and none of the ones that you don't. So I have this right here on the left hand, and then these next 3 kind of act like a dampener, and it just stops that note there. So this one is just resting on those 3, and then these come in to stop the note. And you can get this cool percussive sound there too by just hitting these on the fretboard. And that's something you'll use quite a lot. And when you hit strings without getting a clear note, that's called a dead note, and slap bass has a ton of them. In fact, it's mostly dead notes, and you can get them with the thumb as well, if you have your fingers on the strings here. If you look at the sheet music, it's like XXXXXX0, XXXX23, XXX. It's just so many dead notes and all these different ways to get them and these different percussive sounds. It's kind of a mix of playing bass, like playing a stringed instrument, and playing drums. With all these different ways to get dead notes, you have like these different sounds, like a snare, like a kick drum. That's one way that you're gonna be hitting the low E a lot, and you're gonna be doing this a whole lot while playing slap. So once you can get this for some dead notes, get some solid low E's, and this for some dead notes, then you already can start playing slap. That low E is just completely fundamental, and that's because of the one. The one is so important to playing anything that sounds a bit funky. I learned this from Bootsy Collins. The one is your foundation. The one is everything. As long as you have the one, you're good. And what I mean by that is if you're counting out the rhythm as like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. If you're playing something funky, you always want to accent that one. And that one is your foundation. It's like your root note. So here, overwhelmingly, the one is going to be that low E. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. That is going to keep you grounded. And in the and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you can put just about anything. But as long as you have the one, you're good. I could even play random notes in between and it'll probably still sound good. Yeah, that actually sounded pretty cool. Yeah, I was trying to play wrong notes. See, as long as you have the one. As long as you have the one, you're good. And overwhelmingly, I'm playing the low E there. Sometimes I'll use the F, the first fret, on the one if I want a little bit of movement. So sometimes I'll use that just to give it a bit of movement, and it kind of like moves that foundation over. Though most of the time that I use that first fret on the low E, and it is sparingly, it's in between. And I often use it on the 4 leading into the 1, like this. So I'll often use it like that quite a bit, but I do use that first fret pretty sparingly. And the only other thing you're gonna be doing on the low E is this. Sometimes, which is really satisfying to just slide your finger down, especially right before the 1. And yeah, that is everything you're gonna be doing on the low E. So onto the A string, which you're never actually gonna play the A. You're only going to play 2 notes on this string as well, and both in the same spot. I'm gonna put the first finger onto the 2nd fret, which is very, very similar and feels just like muting. You're just pressing your first finger down a little bit to get a B note right there on the 2nd fret. And then you use your 3rd finger or your 2nd here. I like to use my 3rd just to get even more power, to get the C note there on the 3rd fret. And those are the only 2 notes that you're gonna play on the A. And you're gonna slap them as well, like, yeah. So the same slap, but instead of striking through the E and resting on the A, you're gonna strike through the A and rest on the D string. That's all of the notes that we're going to use for this entire video. We have E and F on the low E, and then we have B and C on the A. And for the other 2 strings, we're just moving those notes around to other places as well. And so already there's only 4 places with these 2 strings for you to be, and they're very, very similar. You know, if you're muting, you're right here. If you're playing these 2, you're also right here, just pressing down, and then you have that F. So you don't really have to move very far, which is important here, especially when improvising, is that you can just very quickly get to a note as soon as it pops into your head. And that efficiency of movement is really important once you start going really fast. To even simplify it more, the 1 is always either an E or an F, and these notes are just part of an E and F power chord. Like the low E and the B here is just a nice power chord, and then with the F and the C, it's just another power chord. And those are all the notes. And then these 2 notes, you're also gonna slap with your thumb just like you slapped at the low E. If I'm really hitting it hard just to mute the other strings, I put my thumb on the low E as well if I'm really going fast and want to make sure that this one isn't ringing out. But it isn't totally necessary. I'll often use these fingers as well that I'm using to fret this string to mute the low E. You can see right here. Really personal preference. I seem to go back and forth just out of habit depending on how much I really need the low E to not be vibrating. But another way to get these notes is when we're bringing in hammer-ons and pull-offs, which we're going to use on this string quite a bit. You can just move that third fret, just like we were doing before, to get that dead note, but bring it into the fret so that you can get that other note there. And that's just called a hammer-on, and we're gonna be doing it on this string quite a bit. And then you can do a pull-off as well by taking this finger and just pulling off of the string, and it kind of feels like you're flicking it off, like someone told me this early on, I started playing guitar and I just can't get it out of my head, is that a pull-off is like you're flicking a booger off of your finger. Like if you had yeah, it's gross. And then you can get a pull-off that way. And then a hammer on the other way. You can kind of mix them. Already we have a lot of different sounds to explore, and we can just bring this into a jam and make some pretty funky music already. Yeah.
That felt good, yeah.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
Yeah.
That's the low E. That's the A. Onto the D string. Also on the D string, you're not going to be playing the D note, because this as well, you're only going to use 2 frets again, and they're the same frets as the A string. So you're going to be doing a very, very similar thing here with the 2nd and the 3rd fret. The frets are the same as the A string, very similar left hand position. It's just a slight tweak. I move my thumb usually over a little bit more when I'm on this string, but those notes are an E, again, and an F. Just mirroring the same thing that we're playing on the low E. Also here, now we have a nice octave between the low E and the 2nd fret, and then the F. 3rd fret here as well, but most of the time I'm in this same position that I'm in for the A string, and my left hand is just kind of always in this same spot, just on the D rather than the A string. That's 2nd and 3rd fret, E and F. The same hammer-ons here also apply that you were doing on the A string. So now we go into the next major slap bass sound, which is popping, which you'll do a lot on this string. And that's where you take your 1st finger or your 2nd finger on your right hand and put it underneath the string, and you just smack it into the fretboard. And it has kind of like a snare drum sound. It's just so satisfying, especially with those low notes. If you do like the low E to the high E octave, that's a super slap bassy sound. Or with the F. That's something that a lot of slap bass players will use all over the neck, but we're just gonna keep to these notes for the sake of this lesson. And there's a lot of nuance to that like popping sound, because you can use it on this string, on its own. If you move your hand, you can get like a duller snare sound. On the high string as well is when it's the most like high snare sound. And then I'll also pop on the A string as well. That's something that's a little bit different, but I really like that sound. It's like a really low snare sound. Right when you start playing slap bass, it's really easy to just always pop on the highest string on the G, but it always gives you that same super bright snare sound. And if you're playing really fast and doing it over and over, it can be a bit tiring. Though in a lot of musical contexts, that can be the best way to do it. But you'll see in the song that I'll play later, I'm popping throughout all of the strings, as well as popping with my left hand in the middle to give more of a subdued snare sound. Especially when I start going really, really fast, I'll bring my hand here so that that pop can be more in line with the other percussive sounds. That's the core of the percussive bass sounds. You get your thump, left hand, pop. And that is just slap bass in a nutshell. Yeah. Now on to the final string, which is kind of a G, but you actually don't ever use the G string on its own for any single notes. The only time you use it on its own is for those popping sounds that I was talking about earlier. If you're using it to get a note, it's always with a chord on the D string. And here's where we get into strumming. So this chapter is more about strumming rather than the G string. It's about the high two. You always strum on the two highest strings, the D and the G. So the first chord you'll be doing here is just an E power chord. Is what the whole song is pretty much based off of. You got the E and then the B here, same notes as before, but just up the string. And then we're just getting that nice power chord right there. So that's the 2nd fret on the D, and then I like to use my pinky on the 4th fret. And you can see my position here is a little bit different because you always want to be muting the strings you don't want to play. I have my 2 middle fingers here. I like bringing them up to mute the E and the A string, and then I also mute with my finger here, and then I'm also muting with my thumb so that it's just very muted. It allows you to be not perfect in your playing, especially when you play fast. There's a lot of nuance and you're never gonna do it perfectly, or at least I'm never gonna do it perfectly. And if you're just muting the strings, that gives you a lot of like insurance not to hit any wrong notes. Though, if you do hit wrong notes, it's kind of just part of the sound, you know? Like those wrong notes are kind of just added flavor. So I have these very muted to get that nice power chord right there. 2nd and 4th fret. I should go into the right hand first. So this took me quite a while to get when I first started playing slap bass, is to get the strum down. You bring your fingers up and it's like this flick. It's like, you wanna go in with the nails and just. And I also find that with the thumb, to anchor it, I'll anchor it right on the top of the fretboard there. So it's like a. And just like what you're doing with the thumb, you're strumming through the strings. And you're really aiming to get your nails onto the strings, and you're strumming through them. And it is also a really satisfying sound on its own. You can get a lot of dead notes this way. And you can also strum up in that same way, keeping the thumb to anchor it on the fretboard. I remember first when I started playing this way, I would really hurt my knuckles because my aim wasn't very good, but I promise you'll get it and you'll be hitting your actual fingernails a bit more often, though I can kind of tell from here that I have still been hitting my knuckles a little bit. So a little bit of injury is just part of playing slap bass, I think. And those same hammer-ons apply here too with these chords. So it's not just these 2 chords that we can get. We can also move out of this position we've been in for some higher chords. And those high chords are just the same notes, just inverted. Instead of E and B, we have E and B. I like to use my 2nd and 3rd finger to get just the 9th fret. And it's nice visually that it's just that last dot before you get to the octave. That's always what I'm looking for. And then I'm also still muting here. Since this is just an E, you also have the 10th fret right there for the F. And bringing in those high chords, especially this high one, adds a lot of like finality to the riff and just gives you another higher sound. So we got those 4 chords here. And just strumming through them. I like to play those exact same chords up an octave past the 12th fret. So I guess that would be the 14th and 16th. I actually don't like saying the fret numbers after the 12th fret. I like to think of it as like 2 and 4, but an octave up. It's easier for me to understand. So we're at 2 and 4, an octave up. And here I like to use my 3rd finger and my middle finger to stop these lower strings. So just like, we got an octave up. So we have those really high chords, and those are satisfying. You gotta move your hand pretty quickly, so it's more of like a flashy once in a while thing. Also on this bass, the main chord, the E, just so happens to be the very last fret that happens to be on this bass. So not every bass will have that, but it's a really satisfying one, so strum them if you got them. You can also tap it with your 2 fingers here, which is kind of fun, especially like for a final thing. Like, that's pretty much the only one that I would tap. And with tapping in general, I like to use my first and second finger here. And whenever I'm tapping, pretty much on any instrument, I like to have my thumb there as like kind of an anchor so that I'm using my whole hand rather than just trying to get it with these two fingers, which is really hard to do. And you got to use a lot of little muscles. So just put your thumb here and have it as one solid object. And then you can use, you know, your whole arm to get those tapping notes. But if I'm going really, really fast, especially if I'm doing those same like slide hammer-on things, I will also bar these two. So with the 9th fret and 10th, I'll just bar it like that. And then you can get even faster. Just have one finger there. So those are the 4 chords that you're gonna be using on the top 2 strings. And the octaves below. That is all the strings that you're gonna be using. Those are all the notes that you're gonna be using on this bass for this type of slap playing. Let's play something kind of funky. Awesome. And those are all the strings. So next up is just a few fancy things you can do with your right hand, and then that's all I can do on the bass. There's a lot more to slap bass than this, but this particular style playing, that's pretty much it. That's all you have to do with the strings. So on to the right hand. That's pretty fun. So one that I end up doing all the time is a particular little finger flingy technique with my first and second finger on my right hand that I use pretty exclusively on this 9th fret barred chord, or maybe, you know, I could do it this way as well. On this 9th fret and 10th fret chord, I pretty much use it exclusively there. And it's this technique where it's like strumming, like you've done before, but you just do it with your first and second finger on your right hand, and then you put your thumb at the top of the fretboard to anchor it. And it's just a lot easier to do it here than it is to do it over here, because you have the fretboard to kind of guide you to the strings and they're not, you know, up on this thing. So what I do is I strum through with these 2 fingers, and then on the way up, I go middle finger first and then first finger. And I usually use this to go pretty fast. And I like to get a good strum with the nails so that there's a good amount of attack on that main beat. The bump, 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 something like that. And I'll usually just use it on this chord, maybe up here. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool too. So that's one finger flingy technique that I just find myself using a lot. And that takes quite a while to get, so be patient with that one. And then I'll also use a lot of what I've been referring to as sprinting. Instead of doing a pop, you replace that pop sound with your ring finger on your right hand, and then while you use the thumb this way, you kind of smack your ring finger in to the strings that way. And I find it works better if I'm over here, also in the fretboard, and that gives you another percussive sound. And it's one that I find I use a lot when I'm improvising, because you don't need to be as accurate with it as you do with the pop. But it is a very different sound. It's a much duller, like, tom of a drum set rather than a snare type of sound. So you use it in different places. You can use that to strum. I find I use it a bunch on the low E. So it's kind of like an upstroke, rather than maybe doing it with just the thumb, which I've never been very good at. That's how like Davey does it, but I find I get a good upstroke with that ring finger sound. I use that a lot in the songs that we've been playing, right before the one, and getting that ring finger in there. And then you can go the full sprinting technique, which I started calling it sprinting because it kind of sounds like a cartoon character sprinting. Doesn't it kind of sound like if the Wile E. Coyote was like, I gotta get out of here. You know? You use that kind of same technique as before, but with the thumb down and then ring finger middle. You can use that on chords as well. It doesn't have that same like nails attack as this one does, I'll find that I'll use that when I need that attack. If I am kind of playing more leisurely, or if I want to save my energy in my right hand, because that one does take a lot of energy out of this one finger, I'll use this sprinting technique. But you can use it anywhere. You could also use it on one string. And it really just sounds like just... It's kind of a mess, but in a fun way. As well, I'll use those two fingers in that sprinting technique to get some extra dead notes. And it kind of sounds like you're doing something really complicated with popping. That would be really, really tough to do. You're just kind of flinging these two fingers there. And there's just so many sounds you can get with that. I kind of see it as, if we're going back to the drum metaphor, a pop, snare, thump. It's kind of like the kick drum, and then left hand, the sprinting stuff is kind of like the toms. But yeah, you can get a lot of cool sounds with that. It's easier to throw that in because getting your fingers underneath the strings to pop it up is something that I find to be pretty difficult to do really, really fast. And the sprinting kind of bridges that gap where you get a similar sound, but you can do it really fast and just throw it out there whenever you want. One more thing I wanted to add to the right hand tricks, you can pop on those chords by using your first and second finger and getting them both underneath there. And you just get a really powerful chord there. The song Ravioli from one of the First of October albums is made exclusively with this bass technique. So that is my slap bass technique. When I'm playing 95% of the time that I'm playing slap bass, I like to keep it simple, just 4 notes, a few different tricks, and that allows you to just really improvise, because being able to improvise so much and having just this big open space outside of the one is just so fun in playing slap bass, and simplifying it for me makes it easier and more fun to do that. This, of course, isn't the only way to play slap bass. There's an infinite amount of nuance and different styles. Then you can go off and find your own. But with just learning an instrument in general, my advice would be to really celebrate the small victories. Every new small technique or musical idea, really explore it and take your time and see how it works in the music that you're creating. Maybe write some riffs with it, maybe jam on it for a bit. And that exploration of a new sound is really something that is a highlight for playing an instrument for me. And then by the time you have kind of gotten sick of that sound and want to move on to something new, you've already practiced it a ton without even really realizing it. Or at least that's how practice works for me. Just find one part of this that you're excited about and just explore it until you've explored it so much that it becomes so easy, and then you can move on to the other thing. Everything I do in this video, you can play. It's just gonna take some time. In conclusion, there's some fun ways to end a song. I love to go through those higher chords, starting with the tapped one, and just pull off to other chords. It's just a fun move. That's a bit tricky, but I like using that a lot. Oh, also, Victor Wooten. He was just a huge inspiration, and I would feel weird if I didn't mention him in this video. And then another way that I like to end, like pretty much any slap bass jam or any slap bass song, is just with a big slap. Just put my first finger here, just like with the low E, and just smack it into the fretboard. And it's just fun to play slap bass and really just slap the bass. That's everything that I know about slap bass. So you can subscribe if you would like. I'm sure this isn't the last time we do something like this, but we're gonna end the video now with taking everything here and putting it into one song. All right, that looks great, guys.
Thank you.
All right, let's go. All right, now go slap the bass. Hope you enjoyed. And if you're looking for more music lessons from me, I've been working with the good people at GuitarQuest. I made my beginner guitar course with them, and I plan on doing a lot more. So if you're watching this in the future, there's going to be a lot more lessons there, including a lot of bass stuff. So check that out if you would like, and subscribe to this channel if you want more videos from me. Thanks so much for watching.